This is Create Mekanized, and this fuses the best parts of Create with the best parts of Mechanism and makes an amazing mod pack with a bunch of really cool features. So let's firstly use this awesome Create door to go into our lovely castle and explore all of the features that Create Mekanized has to offer. Now, the first thing you need to understand about this mod pack is it is a progressive mod pack. So you're going to start with very low resources and you're going to have to work from the ground up all the way until you get to the really cool stuff at the end. Now, this is done using chapters, and you go through this pack unlocking the basics of Create, then the basics of Mechanism, and then going all the way until you reach crazy interstellar travel. Now, this is just an overview, but you can go on the left-hand side and see that each of these has different milestones that you need to hit in order to be able to progress. So let's run through chapter 1 together so you can see exactly how that works. So first up, you're given 3 tasks: automating cobblestone, automating lava, and automating wood. And if you see, all of these will eventually get you to the state where you're making a basic mechanism. A basic mechanism is basically an ingredient that you will use later on to make more advanced equipment. So making a cobblestone farm is very, very simple. It is basically water and lava, nice and easy, and then you just need something giving turning force to a drill at the back and a way to collect it. Now, Mechanism gives you these mechanized bins, which are very similar to the Drawers mod, and it will just collect a bunch of items for you. This is a more advanced one, but you'll have a nice basic one to start out with. All it's going to cost you is some cobblestone, some redstone, and an iron ingot, so I would recommend getting these pretty early, and they can hold over 4,000 items, which is pretty cool. But that is how simple the cobblestone farm is, and you can go in and just grab a bunch of the cobblestone, and that will give you your task complete. Go into here, click the check mark, and then you move on to the next section, which is automating gravel. Now, this is where we start to see Mechanism and Create fusing together in a really cool way, because what you can do is use these Mechanism bins plus the logistical transporters in order to make a cool gravel farm. Something like this beauty here. So if we drop the cobblestone into that bin, what we'll see is that it will start moving the cobblestone over into the millstone, and then once it's all ground up, that will move across here into the lovely gravel bin. We can grab some gravel and get ourselves a complete task on that. And when you complete the task, you'll actually get a little bit more advanced stuff that you actually can't make yet. The brass funnel is very, very useful, and you will need to use this wisely. I'd recommend using it in something like a washing machine, not the type of washing machine you're thinking of. It's the type of washing machine that washes gravel into iron nuggets and into flint. And we'll see, hopefully, after a few seconds, this should pop down through the funnel. There we go, and that will split off into the iron and the flint. And it pretty much just progresses like that. You can fuse vanilla farms, which makes the lava, with Create pipes and pumps in order to put it into a mechanized tank. And you're seeing everything working really nicely together, and you're able to make some really cool and quite compact farms doing this. And that's before we even get on to contraptions, like this beauty right here. This one might be overflowing a little bit. I may have forgot to empty it before I started hitting recording, and yeah, it's kind of overflowing slightly, but it is an amazing way to generate wood. It is going to be super useful for making a lot of the Create ingredients. Now, funnily enough, that's actually all you need to be able to progress through chapter 1. There's just a couple of extra steps that you need to think about. So for example, if we grab ourselves some of the gravel, grab ourselves some lava, and also grab some flint that we made earlier, we can throw it all into this basin here, add in the lava, and then use this hand crank to make ourselves some lovely andesite. And andesite is used in a lot of Create recipes. You could basically go and dig it out yourself, but you know, it's better to make it all automatic if you can do. But we can go and turn the andesite into andesite alloy using some of the iron nuggets that we made earlier. Turn that alloy into shafts, and then use that shaft with some wood to make ourselves some cogwheels. Anyone that's played Create before knows how important cogwheels are, and we actually need them to be able to make the basic mechanism at the end of chapter 1. So using all of the resources that we have gathered so far, we can then stick some iron nuggets into this basic mechanism farm. It will compress those down into lovely iron ingots. Those will flatten into iron sheets. use the cogwheels to turn those into unfinished mechanisms, and then finally crush it down, and you will find yourself with a bunch of the basic mechanisms. And that is chapter 1 for you. Once you make the basic mechanism, chapter 1 is done, and you will have your basic materials all fully automated and ready to go, so you don't need to worry about making them in chapter 2 and beyond. Now, if you want to take some shortcuts, you can go into the Closet of Shame, and you will see a load of thermal series machines, and all of these will do a bunch of things for you. That means you can basically skip part of chapter 1 or chapter 2, so use these if you want to. If you want to skip them, I don't like doing it because I like learning all of the create different mechanics as well as playing with Mechanism. You know, that's kind of the point of the pack, really. Now, chapter 2, we're not going to go into in as much detail as chapter 1 because it follows a similar structure, but I'm going to give you a brief overview of what is available. So first up, you're going to need to go to the Nether because that's going to allow you to grab yourself a blaze from a blaze fortress and make yourself a blaze burner. I'd actually recommend going and getting yourself a couple of these because you will use them a little bit later in the pack as well, so it's definitely worth getting them nice and early. But the first thing you're going to want to do with your blaze burner is turn some normal redstone into some liquid redstone, or destabilized redstone, it's basically liquid redstone, using a lovely mixer. And this is the first time that you need heat with a mixer, so just make sure that you are actually feeding the blaze burner some fuel. It can be coal, wood, whatever you want it to be, but anything will work. Now, while you're in the Nether, you're probably going to want to pick up some Certus quartz as well, because you're going to use that for your electron tubes. However, you can also make a lovely Certus quartz farm using a setup similar to this. Now, all this is doing is turning normal sand into soul sand. Alternatively, you can just mine a bunch of soul sand out, and then that's washing that, and that is turning it into Certus quartz and a few gold nuggets. You're not going to get a reliable source of gold nuggets doing this, but you will get a bunch of Certus quartz. So then if you stick your Certus quartz in this machine here, it's going to drip the redstone down, it's going to use some sandpaper on it, which is just sand and paper, and your iron nuggets from chapter 1, in order to make these lovely electron tubes. And these are used a lot later on. Definitely worth setting up a farm for these. Now, a really important part of chapter 2 is unlocking brass for your arms, funnels, all of that sort of good stuff, and that's pretty easy to do. You just combine some zinc and some copper in this exact same setup we were using for the redstone, and you will get out some lovely brass. And once you've got some brass, you can use it with this machine, which uses electron tubes, the cogwheels, and a configurator from Mechanism in order to make precision mechanisms. And these precision mechanisms are used a lot later game. To do anything that's even remotely delicate, you're gonna need a precision mechanism. And that's basically chapter 2 done, making the precision mechanism. There is one more step, which is making all of the other smart items. However, you don't actually need to do this. It's just a very nice way to show you how to craft them, but it basically finishes with the precision mechanism, and then you can move on to some really exciting stuff in chapter 3, because this is where the mod pack gets a little bit wild. Before we do that though, let me introduce you to Hell's Distraction Corner, because this is the stuff that will stop you from actually progressing in the pack, because you'll get distracted because they are incredibly fun. First up on the list, we have the grappling hook. That's right, there's a grappling hook. And this is incredibly fun to use, so you can just jump up and try and grapple hook your way up, and look at this! Look how cool this is! You could just grappling hook your way up, and then we can make it all the way up to the roof if we want. And slight spoilers for later chapters, but yeah, this is super cool. Oh, and you can also upgrade it with rockets. Yeah, rocket grappling hooks, that's a thing. Make sure you check them out because they are awesome. And then if we use our lovely airship elevator, that's right, we made an airship into an elevator, we should be able to fly ourselves right into chapter 3. There you go. And just a heads up, you need to press R to get out of this. If you press shift, it won't work. And it did take me a ridiculous amount of time to actually figure out how to do that. But then if we break it, we have a secret message, which is subscribe to Hellfire Mage. Do it! If you are enjoying the video, make sure to subscribe. This is a brand new mod pack for us, so there's much more of these to come. Make sure to subscribe and you will get to see more awesome content like this. Okay, shameless self-promo over. Let's have a look at Mechanism. So to get started with Mechanism, you're going to want some sort of energy generator. In this case, I'm just using a heat generator because it's nice and simple and just uses some lava for fuel. You'll also want some sort of storage. So in this case, I've got an energy cube that has been very slowly filling up over time. And the next thing you're going to want to make is one of these metallurgic infusers. Now, I'm not going to go through entirely how Mekanism works from start to finish because that would take way too long. But if you do want to know that sort of stuff, I already have a video on my channel about Mekanism, going from the very basics to the much more complicated. Go check it out if you need a bit of help, but we'll run through some of the basics for this mod pack here. Now, once you've infused some alloys here, you can make wind generators, solar generators, some of the more advanced generators that are just going to give you a lot more power than the normal heat generator would. And then you want to be moving on to starting to make this biofuel generator and the biofuel that powers it. Biofuel is incredibly strong, but the more important thing is that it produces a byproduct which we're going to use to make a thing called HDPE. So it's pretty simple. You just use some seeds, crush them down into seed oil. That oil flows through. You can use that to power a blaze burner if you give it a straw. Look, it's got a cool little cola hat with a straw on there. And if you mix that seed oil with something like some saplings or some sticks, that's going to fuse that all together and turn into biomass, which can then be used to power the biomass generator. So now all you need to do is split water into hydrogen and oxygen, take that hydrogen and combine it with some biomass and some water, and that will turn itself into some ethylene and some substrates, which, as you can see, flashes up really quickly there. This substrate then passes down over here all the way to the end to go into this pressurized reaction chamber, which combines with the oxygen that we made before and some liquid ethylene. Now, the ethylene that comes out of this is in gas form. So what you're going to need to do is convert that from gas to liquid using a rotary condenser, and then you will be able to use all that to make the HDPE. And HDPE is very, very important because it's what's used to make your Mekanism circuits. Now, you might be used to doing this very easily using just Mekanism, but this is the way that you would do it in Create Mekanized, and it honestly balances the pack really well. Now, I've set this up to show you exactly how it works. Nice and basic ingredients for the basic one, and then it gets a little bit more advanced as we go along. But all we need to do is convert these HDPE pellets into some HDPE sheets, put those into this system, and then it just works exactly the same as all of the other machines that we've made before. It goes through, does all of the processing until finally it will stamp this out and turn it into one of the basic circuits. Now, these upgrade to the red one and then to the blue one, and then it will finally go into the purple one, and these are used in very, very endgame stuff. They are expensive to make, but are super, super cool. So that is how you would turn seeds into advanced and complicated circuits. A little bit wild, but really, really cool. And remember that if you get stuck, you can always go back to the quests, and that will cover everything from the seed oil to the ethylene, making the HDPE pellets, sheets, and circuits. Now, there's a couple of other things that you need to know about Chapter 3 if you are going to make things a little bit easier for yourself. First off, the jetpack is going to help with mobility for you. You can just make this pretty easily. I'm not going to spoil your first experience using the jetpack because it's really cool. You should go and use it. It's very, very fun. Now, the electric motor, you will have seen me use constantly. There's one over here, there's 5 over here, and there's even one over here. And what they're used for is turning the energy from Mekanism into turning force in Create. This is about as simple as you can get. Energy source, cable, motor, rotational force, and then you have your mixer. This is so much more compact than making water wheels and all these energy sources. And when you get to later game where you're making just crazy amounts using nuclear reactors, well then you're basically going to have infinite turning force, and you can make some crazy mechanisms with it. Oh, and you have the alternator that does the reverse, but that's not important. No one cares about the alternator. All right, so that was a lot of information to throw at you. So let's do some much more easy and fun things, like making trains. Oh, and this is also a machine that just turns coal into diamonds. It's pretty cool. You can have infinite diamonds, but I'll leave you to figure out how that one works. So we're going to make a train to ride us from Chapter 3 to Chapter 4. It is really cool. You can make this as big, as small as you want to. It is very nice. I cannot build trains. I have tried to build trains. They never look good. This looks awful, but that is the way that I build trains. They can be as simple or as complex and as beautiful or ugly as you want them to be. But regardless of how you build it, first thing you're going to need is some crushing wheels to make some obsidian dust, because they're the only things strong enough to crush some obsidian. And in order to do that, you need one of these giant crafting grids made of mechanical crafters. Now, if you don't know how these work, they're basically a giant crafting grid. You just need rotational force, a redstone signal, and it will put all of the items together much bigger than a normal crafting grid, and eventually they will all fuse together and we will get some lovely crushing wheels. Boom. We can then throw a stack of obsidian in here. After quite a while, it genuinely does take forever. These will all crush down into obsidian dust. And then once this finally comes out, you can pour lava on it and smash it up to make these lovely sturdy sheets. And when you've got some sturdy sheets, you can go over here, take these lovely brass casings and turn them into train casings. And this is what you're going to need in order to make your trains. Make yourself a train station. Glue yourself a train together and make sure you've got both a seat and some train controls. And then you're all ready to head off to chapter 4. Choo-choo, all aboard! So now that we've reached chapter 4, we can go and have a look at the different items that are available. Now these, I'm not going to go into much detail, it pretty much shows you here what you need, and these are just really cool things, like look at the texture of that, that's pretty amazing. But what we're going to look at is this chromatic compound. It uses just some basic stuff there, but if we grab it, we can then take it over to this shadow steel area, which is just an end portal, and then if we jump through, and throw the chromatic compound into the void, then if we wait for a moment, you'll see that it will fly up as this beautiful shadow steel. Now let's take the shadow steel back and see what we can make with it, because it is a very important ingredient for making your spaceship. Now one of the first things you're going to want to do is craft one of these lovely things. What is it? It is a spacesuit. And once you've got all of the pieces of the spacesuit, you are all fully equipped to go out into space, assuming that you actually fill it with oxygen. But before we do that, we need to actually make a spaceship, and that is all of what Chapter 4 is about. So welcome to the actual Chapter 4. This is all about building your spaceship and how we will be going to the moon. And then behind us over here is Chapter 5, which is all about nuclear reactors and all of that fun stuff, and we will cover that before we go in our lovely rocket ship. So if we look at Chapter 4, you can see we've already done this bottom section. We've got ourselves some chromatic compound, some shadow steel, and we've made ourselves a spacesuit. However, now we need to do this preparing for space travel side of things, and that requires us to make all of these different bits in order to make a lovely rocket. Now, some of them are very simple. A seat we've already made in the train section. The glass is just glass. But some of them are a little bit more complicated, such as the guidance mechanism. So what we're going to do is we're going to go from the very beginning and start with the heat engine, and then work our way through these and build the rocket one part at a time. So first farm, all we need is some andesite alloy. That's going to use basic ingredients that we've already used before, and that's just going to make some heat engines. So heat engines are used to make the engine later on, and nice and simple to make, to be honest with you, nothing too complicated here. The next thing that you need to know about is this tier 1 plating, and we're going to need quite a lot of this going forwards. So all you need for this is some steel, you need some shadow steel, and you need some bronze. All of these are very, very simple to get. If we look how to make steel, it's very easy. All you need is some coal going into a crusher to make some crushed coal, and then you need some iron to go in there. So very, very simple, and you'll get your steel out. Combine them together, you get your steel block. We've done shadow steel, and the bronze block is just a block of bronze. Fuse these all together with a superheated blaze burner, and in order to make a blaze burner all nice and blue like this, you'll need an item called a blaze cake. Blaze cakes are pretty easy to make, but they're a little bit complicated to actually get the ingredients for, so just check the recipe on JEI and it will show you exactly how that works. But once you crush all of these together, it's going to make you some tier 1 plating, and you need a fair bit for the rocket, as well as needing some for the engine itself. And when we jump over to the engine, none of this should be too unfamiliar for you. You've got your tier 1 plating, you've got some copper wire, which is just made by stripping the copper down in one of the rollers. You've got your heat engine that we made earlier and the elite control circuit we looked at in chapter 3. The one thing that is new though is this engine frame. Now these engine frames are made using iron rods and steel plates. Very, very easy to make those. And then you just craft it in one of these crafters. And as you can see here, you can fully automate it to get an absolute ton of engine frames. Feed that into this machine and you will find yourself at the end of it with a steel engine. Now, really importantly here, and I can't stress this enough, there is very little reason to make a farm for this. I have done this just for display purposes. You can just do this in a very manual way. If you have a look at this rocket, you actually only need one steel engine. So at least for chapters 4 and 5, you really don't need any more than one of them, but you can make them because they do come in useful later on if you do want to. So now that we've got our engine, we need to actually stabilize things a little bit more, and that is where the rocket fins come in. Now this is a super easy farm. All you need is these steel plates, which is a crushed set of steel ingots, and then make sure the saw is rotating the opposite way to the belts, and it will just cut it into the rocket fins. Very easy, nice and simple. Now it's pretty much the same when we're looking at the rocket nose cone as well, because it's just steel ingots, they get cut into the incomplete rocket nose cone. This copper nugget comes down and it just puts it into a full rocket nose cone. Not much different on this. Once you've got the basics of it, it's pretty easy to understand what's going on. We can just take that out and it will just start processing them as normally. No problems at all. Now, the one that's really exciting is the guidance system, because that is going to bring everything together that you have learned so far and put it to the test in order to make guidance systems. Again, you don't need a farm for this. This is just so overkill, but it's still fun to make. So what this is going to use is the electron tubes from chapter 2, the ultimate control circuits that we looked at in chapter 3, the processor and the logic mechanism. We actually had the machines downstairs in chapter 3 for these as well. Very simple, pretty much the same process as the circuit boards. Then we have gold wire, which is made the same way copper is, the precision mechanisms from chapter 2, and then just a normal configurator. And what we need to do is put one shadow steel in here, and it will slowly stamp these into incomplete guidance mechanisms. Now the tricky thing is you need to do this multiple times to get it to work. So that's where this system comes in. Any finished ones will go in there first, and if it's not finished, it will then go into the second one. Pull it all the way back, and these mechanism tubes can go straight into a belt and place the item back on the belt. So if you see how this one works, it's going to bypass the finished one, get sucked into there, go all the way across here, and then get placed back on the belt, and then it's going to go through this system all over again. Now there is also a 20% chance that this guidance mechanism is going to fail, and if it does, we need a way to get rid of it. And that's where this lava comes in, because if it is no longer an incomplete mechanism, and if it has not turned into a normal mechanism, then what it's going to do is just bypass both of these, go straight into the lava, and then it is gone forever. Super wasteful, but it gets the job done and stops your machines from clogging up. Now the only things we're missing here are these steel tanks at the bottom, but they're super easy to make. You just need a bucket and some steel plates, and then you just need some glass and the seat, and also a vent. Now the vent is super easy. It's just 4 iron rods, similar to what we did to make the machine frames earlier. So that should be everything that we need for the rocket. So if we do this, it should hopefully all slowly come together, and with the final engine in place, that should come together. Boom! We have ourselves a lovely tiny rocket. Okay, maybe not quite that tiny, but this also looks really cool. I definitely should have used this in the thumbnail instead. And now all we need is some rocket fuel. Really easy to make rocket fuel. You just need oil going through not 1, but 2 fractional stills, and then out it will come into a fuel loader. And if we have a look in here now, you'll see it is slowly filling up with fuel. You can also put in the fuel manually instead of using a fuel loader, but the fuel loader is needed to progress anyway, so you might as well use it. So we have a rocket, and we can go to the moon. However, before we set off to the moon, because it's a very long way away, I want to show you chapter 5, because chapter 5 is a lot of fun. Now, just be aware, this is going to be a lot of information very quickly, so if you need to pause and rewind the video, then do that, absolutely. And even if you get to chapter 5 and need to come back to it, that is absolutely fine as well. So, nuclear physics. Well, this is quite interesting and one of my favorite things to do in all of Mechanism. Now, I'm going to do this backwards because doing it backwards is the best way to understand it. So the whole reason that you're doing this Mechanism reactor stuff is so that you can get plutonium pellets and polonium pellets. Now, what do you need those for? Good question. The main thing you're going to need it for is Mechanism QIO, because you need to craft drives and computers and all of that fun stuff here. They're all on the screen now if you want to see what you actually need to make. So if you go into it, you can just store items in here. You can take items out. Absolutely no problem in doing that. Nice and simple. And the great thing is as well, you can use importers and exporters. So if we just take a load of Cobalt out of here, stick it in there, that will go into this system and then come out of the system because it's got an exporter. If we break the exporter and take it out, then we can just put it in here and it will instead be stored inside the computer instead. I am not going to go into all of the details in Mechanism QIO, that is an entire video by itself, but basically, if you've used refined storage or applied energistics, it's basically the same, but it's going to require your nuclear materials. So back at the reactor, you're just taking nuclear waste and filtering it through these two systems in order to make these pellets. Now, I'm not going to go into exactly how this works, there's plenty of guides out there that will show you, and I'll probably make a guide myself, but this is the whole function of it. Now, if we turn this nuclear reactor on, a few things are going to happen. It's going to use this fissile fuel as well as a bunch of water to generate electricity. So if we turn it on and then go over here, the turbine's going to start spinning. It's going to start generating quite a bit of electricity, which is going to go into these cubes. And you can see all of these cubes are filling up quite quickly. Not this one for some reason, but these ones are filling up quite quickly. Now, the bigger your generator, the more energy it'll produce, and more importantly, the more nuclear waste it'll produce, and the bigger the turbine, the more energy that will produce as well. Now, don't worry too much about how these actually work or how to build them. There is a guide on my channel to do that, and I'll link that in the description down below. But all you need to know is that it generates energy, which you can then turn into turning force. I'm going to switch this off because otherwise it's going to overflow. And it uses fissile fuel to make nuclear waste. And if we have a look, you'll see we've actually generated a couple of pellets while that's been going. So it works very, very efficiently. Now, this process is actually really simple. This heats up, turns the water into steam, steam turns the turbine and makes energy, and your output is nuclear waste, which we are refining into polonium and plutonium pellets. Nice and simple. Now, the problem comes with generating the fissile fuel, because you don't just find fissile fuel out there, you have to synthesize it yourself. And that is where this whole mess comes in. So you actually don't need many raw ingredients at all in order to make it. The main ones really are over here. You need some uranium ingots, and that's all going to be refined over here. You also need to find yourself a source of water. So that's quite easy to make as well. You'll need some gunpowder, and you'll also need some fluorite. That's basically it. That's all you need to make nuclear fuel. However, it has to go through a lot of processes. So I've labeled these to make it a little bit easier, and I'll run you through how it works. So first up, you're just turning water into brine, and that's just done with this thermal evaporation chamber. This can be done completely passively, especially if you're in like a desert biome, or alternatively, you can put solar arrays on the top, and that will increase the temperature of this and make it much, much faster. Now, once we've got the brine, we just need to separate that, and that's going to go into sodium and chlorine, and it's only the chlorine that we actually need going forwards. So once you mix chlorine with hydrogen, which again you get from separating water into hydrogen and oxygen, then that's going to mix together and make hydrogen chloride. So the gunpowder mixes with the hydrogen chloride to make sulfur. The sulfur goes in the oxidization chamber to make sulfur oxide, and then that is then mixed with additional oxygen to make sulfur trioxide. quite simple. Dioxide plus oxygen, trioxide. If we mix the sulfur trioxide with some water vapor, you will get yourself the lovely sulfuric acid. And then you mix the sulfuric acid with the fluorite, and that will give you hydrofluoric acid. Don't feel like you need to remember this, by the way. You can just check it on JEI and it will tell you all of these steps. You just have to follow it in multiple phases. But I'm just trying to show you how linear it is. It's not really that complicated once you know how it works. Now, hydrofluoric acid is kind of the end stage of that branch, and then we need to look at the uranium branch. So you just go and enrich uranium into yellow cake uranium, you then oxidize that into uranium oxide, and then you mix that with the hydrofluoric acid to make uranium hexafluoride. Now, uranium hexafluoride is basically the end stage. You just need to run it through the isotopic centrifuge, and that will give you your fissile fuel, and then you are pretty much ready to go. And that's it. Nuclear Physics 101. Hopefully that made a little bit of sense to you. If it didn't, don't worry about it. It is nuclear physics at the end of the day, and you can just always check back on the video, or you can go and check JEI or the wiki, and it will tell you exactly how to do this as well. But I think we've done enough nuclear physics, and I think I want to go to the moon. So I've got my spacesuit on, and we are going to go to the moon. Whee! Ah! Okay, this is kind of terrifying. Hey, look, I can see my house from here. So now we get to this lovely screen here, and we can go to the solar system, we can go to Earth, and then go to the moon. And there we go. We have completed chapter 4 by dropping towards the moon, and this is going to explode if we don't put the rocket boosters on. So just hold space, slow down your spacecraft, and then slowly descend to the moon's surface. So welcome to the moon, and they've even got the low gravity. It's pretty awesome to bounce around and have fun on here. We've only covered the first 5 chapters, and there are another 5 chapters for you to discover by yourself, but this should give you a good introduction to the pack and show off some of the cool things that you can do with it. So we're going to leave it there for today. Thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more, and if you want to support the channel, check out the channel members in the description as well. Thanks for watching, everyone. I've been Hellfire Mage, and I will see you next time. Bye!